I think this video is a good example of the fact that I like to ask questions as opposed to provide answers. And the last few vids and thoughts have given me something to ponder about this thing that I mentioned about the world. See one of the previous videos, like what's the world, where's the world, and on the back of that, it's easy to see the distinction when you're in the park. See the distinction between the world, which is what I now associate with the story that we're making about things, whether that's individually or collectively. And it seems that the world is everybody's stories, everybody's take on what's happening, all thrown together with a big and then like averaged out into like a collective story. So that's the world, sort of culture, really. That's what culture is. But when you're in the park, for example, I can ask the question, what is it that's actually happening now? So it's quite easy to see what's happening, just observing, without my story, my interpretation. That what's happening. Let's say I wasn't here. If I wasn't here, I think that's a good way to ask, what is it that's happening? Like, what would be happening if I weren't there to see it? So what would be happening is there's birds tweeting, flying, building things. There's animals running around, doing what they do. There's people walking dogs. There's all of the massive loads of processes that are going on microscopically with all the plants and the earth and everything. I mean, you could really question. You could really say that's still an interpretation based on a collection of human knowledge of what's actually going on. But it's just a good way of trying to remove your interpretation. And with interpretation comes your thoughts. So like, you could be walking along the path completely unaware of what's actually happening, because what you're doing is thinking. So you've attached to the thoughts that are going on in your head, and you can be having an experience of reality purely based on the thoughts that are happening in your head, rather than just being present. It's a bit of a term that's bandied around these days. I wonder if people actually know what I mean when I say being present. It's a bit of a catch-all term now in like spiritual circles, but it is a good way of saying it. So all these other things tend to follow it, which backs up some people's, again, spiritual, in inverted commas, interpretation of things or take on things. So other things that follow from doing that. So just by asking this question, I realised that to interpret things or to witness things properly without my interpretation, I have to be present. And then being present without that interpretation means coming into the senses more. So the senses come alive then. So everything all of a sudden comes into technicolor, that I can see. I can hear things more. And I'm absolutely certain, based on a lot of other reading and research I like to do on various things, I'm sure that what my body is emitting in terms of electromagnetic fields, as well as everything else, because everything else emits the same electromagnetic fields, different degrees, different frequencies, different levels, and whatever else. There's this huge interaction going on that the senses aren't even aware of. Maybe we use another mode of being to access that. But yeah, kind of gone off on one there, but I think there is a link to all that, and it's about asking the question, what's actually going on? What's actually happening in a situation? And there's a very clear distinction to be made. Sometimes it's hard to make it, but you can do it. There's a distinction to be made between what we think is going on and all of the story, all of the meaning we're making out of a natural situation, which is somehow interacting with and colliding with and making sense with the rest of our story and thoughts and interpretation of reality up to this point. So there's a distinction to be made between that and what's actually happening. What is actually happening? So open the senses, like get into the body in a way, and it all becomes dead clear. So I'll leave it there. Hope everyone's well. See you again.